Hi everyone, in this video I want to give you a quick overview of the Rhetoric in Everyday Life project. The first thing to do is to locate the assignment sheet itself. If you go over to our website and click on the modules, you'll find the different steps of the project listed throughout the modules. I'd go ahead and click on that, and within any of these steps you're going to see a quick description of that step itself. Down at the bottom there will be a link to download the full assignment sheet. If you click on that, it'll download a PDF, and that's mainly what we're going to be looking at right now. So the assignment sheet looks a little like this. We have 4 major steps in the assignment: a first annotation, a peer review draft, peer review responses, and a final draft. I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail later. The overall idea of the assignment is that you're going to be analyzing an everyday text in order to understand how rhetoric is operating within that text. I've had the most success with people looking at an episode of a TV show or a movie. And I also highly recommend looking for a scene within that show where a character gives a monologue or where they're trying to be directly persuasive, because a lot of these classical rhetoric concepts are a lot easier to find in those instances. So I'd find an episode of a TV show that you don't mind watching lots of times, something where someone's trying to be directly persuasive, and that'll probably be a good place to start. In terms of the paper, it's not going to look like your traditional paper. It's not going to have an introduction and a conclusion and a bunch of body paragraphs. It's really just going to have a brief introduction and then a number of annotations where you're really focusing on your analysis. The introduction should really give me a summary of the TV episode or the movie, of the text that you're looking at. Really tell me what it's about and give me enough information that I can understand the rest of the annotations that follow. I'll show you an example of this later. Your paper itself, the annotations, you're going to have 6 annotations, and each one should start with a concise definition of the term in your own words. Please, please, please make sure that you're writing these in your own words, because it really shows me that you are understanding the concept. At the same time, you need to be very specific in these definitions. The more specific you are and the more specific concepts you use in it, the easier it will be throughout the rest of the annotation to really prove your point. After you offer that definition, give me an example of this concept from the text that you're looking at. I found a lot of success when students are looking at specific quotes here, because a lot of these rhetorical concepts are best demonstrated through quotes. With that being said, you can also use some rhetoric from the material world, from examples of the fashion or architecture or props within the thing that you're looking at. Whatever you look at, just make sure that it's really well fitted to the definition that you're providing. Finally, this is the main part of your annotation. You're going to be writing an explanation that clearly shows how that example is a definite example of the definition that you gave. So, tie specific wording from that example back to the specific concepts that you provide in the actual definition. Really be careful, be clear, be specific in this explanation. The more specific you are, the better it's going to be. This is also usually by far the largest segment of each annotation. So if you're providing a really, really short explanation, it's probably not going into enough detail. I've found some success in likening this to a legal proof. So if you're thinking about the clear definition of a specific law and proving that a specific case or a specific instance really fits to that definition, that's a lot like what you're doing here. You're taking a specific case, a specific instance from this TV show, and proving it fits the definition of this rhetorical concept. Overall, there's a fairly strict structure of what you can use for your 6 different annotations. Your first annotation should either be a method of appeal, ethos, pathos, or logos, not all 3, an enthymeme, or a syllogism. These are fairly broad, major concepts in rhetoric, and there's some definitions and information to help you learn about those here. The next 2 annotations should be figures of speech or reasoning. Again, there's a lot of these out there, and I have some long lists of those available so you can really start to explore that. Next are rhetorical fallacies. So you have 1 annotation for a rhetorical fallacy. Go out and look at these. There's a lot of rhetorical fallacies out there. And then finally, the last 2 are common and special topics of invention. But let's look at what these annotations end up looking like. So this is an example which I have, which works off of Season 1, Episode 1 of The Newsroom. Just because of copyright restrictions, I'm not going to include an actual clip of the show, but you can find this particular speech elsewhere on the internet if you look. In this speech, the main character, Will McAvoy, is talking on the question of why he's answering the question why America is the greatest country in the world, and he really tries to dodge the question at first and then ends up giving an extended answer about why he doesn't think that America is the greatest country anymore. Mind you, my choice of this example really has nothing to do with trying to expose a particular political thought or anything else like that. I'm really just choosing it because it's a very, very clear use of somewhat flawed rhetoric. So we're going to be using this solely for the purpose of trying to analyze it, not to try and forward any of the arguments that he's making. I just feel like I need to make that caveat here at the beginning. But let's look at a few different examples. So McAvoy uses a number of different enthymemes in his discussion. And so I have a definition of an enthymeme here, which is a definition in my own words, based upon reading other definitions and trying to understand what it is and then explain what it is in a way that I think is fairly approachable. An enthymeme is actually a shortened syllogism, so we also have to kind of discuss what a syllogism is. An enthymeme is a shortened syllogism where one premise is not stated directly. Traditionally, syllogisms have been used to show a complete logical argument. So they might say something like, all men are mortal. This is the traditional example. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So we have these two set-up statements that then follow logically that we can create that conclusion. So enthymemes are often more common in speech, whereas assume that we have a common shared knowledge. And so here's an example from McAvoy's speech. He says, there's absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, and he goes on to list a whole bunch of other things. So this is an enthymeme because we don't see those two setup statements equally used. We see the conclusion, there's no evidence to support the statement we're the greatest country in the world, and then he starts spouting off a bunch of different statistics which he thinks proves this. This is all based upon the accepted premise that we might all share, that he's hoping we all share, that if we were the greatest country in the world, we would be number one in one of these different things. So you can see this in my actual explanation. He uses enthymemes a lot throughout his argument. He regularly states that America is not the greatest country, but that it used to be the greatest, and then provides specific data points naming the premises that link that data to the conclusion. In the example above, there are multiple potential unnamed premises. Perhaps he is stating that America should be first in each of these measurements, or maybe he's arguing that it should be first in at least one of these. So you could see an argument that he is saying that says the greatest country in the world has the highest literacy, we're 7th in literacy, hence, therefore, we are not the greatest. You see where I'm going with this? That type of three-step setup would be a syllogism. This is an enthymeme because it lacks that. Let's look at another example. So he uses a figure of speech. Like I said, there's a lot of different figures of speech out there. The figure of speech that I'm identifying here is antithesis. So antithesis is demonstrating and expressing contrary ideas in a single sentence. It typically is used to draw out a difference in meaning that the speaker wants to explore. So in this example, McAvoy says we waged wars on poverty, not poor people. So this is part of his argument about the greatness that America used to have. So he says, we waged wars on poverty, not poor people. So here he's trying to demonstrate that we used to be the greatest country in the world. He makes the argument about the moral standing of the country and ultimately links the morality to the place of news in citizens' daily lives. But in this particular sentence, he's using the antithesis to demonstrate a difference between categorizing and combating things such as poverty or people. Combating problems or people who actually should be gaining support or help with these types of problems. So this is the type of antithesis he uses. He also falls into some fallacies. So I have an example of an ad hominem fallacy here, and we can also see how he sets up some of his arguments using antecedent and consequence. So let's close by talking about the different steps in this project. The first thing you'll do is create an initial annotation. In this annotation, I'd like you to produce the summary of your episode or movie that you're analyzing, and then also create one annotation that includes the definition, the example from the text, and the explanation. Now, a lot of people choose the first category for this, the methods of appeal or the enthymeme or syllogism, because they're fairly easy concepts overall and you don't have to look through too many different things to do that. This will give me a chance to take a look at your really early draft and give you some feedback and make sure that you're on the right track for this project. After that, you're going to be producing a draft for peer review. This is basically a half-done draft, so you'll need to have your initial summary and 3 annotations in this draft. Then you'll be providing responses to your peers' drafts. This also gives you a chance to look at some other examples and really see what this project looks like in different cases. And then finally, you're going to be developing the final draft, which should have the initial summary and all 6 required annotations. The first 3 steps of this project are all going to be graded on a credit, no credit basis. So as long as you're meeting the major expectations of the assignment, you're going to be getting full credit on the first annotation, the peer review draft, and the peer review responses. The final draft does have a little bit more specific grading scale, and I have some more information about this here. If you have any other questions about the assignment, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to clarify anything about the assignment that still is unclear. Looking forward to seeing your first drafts by the end of this first week.